December 21, 2025. The Caribbean Sea. A massive 318,000-ton oil tanker named Bella 1 suddenly erupts into frantic motion. Engines screaming as it executes a desperate U-turn to escape the incoming U.S. Coast Guard cutter. This becomes a transatlantic pursuit of the highest stakes and most intense pressure. In absolute desperation, the crew hastily smears a makeshift Russian flag across the hull, like a criminal throwing a phony police badge on his escape vehicle. Russia snarls. Lay a hand on it and face war with Russia. Huge error. Come New Year's 2026, the vessel, now desperately rechristened Marinera, becomes an isolated, disgraced hulk adrift in the North Atlantic. Its oil revenue pipeline severed permanently. This is the story of how the United States sent Putin's shadow fleet into terrified retreat. And Russia was the first to back down. 5 a.m., the Caribbean Sea. As the planet rests, the USCGC Berthoff pursues a phantom. This is a precision strike targeting the heart of the Kremlin's military apparatus. We're discussing a 418-feet legendary national security cutter, 5,500 tons of American might built for a single purpose, critical interdiction missions. The prey, the Bella 1, an enormous 318,000-ton corroded giant functioning as Putin's floating vault. Within that hull sits 2 million barrels of illegal oil. Should this shipment arrive at port, it means a $100 million boost for the weapons hammering Ukraine. Should the Berthoff intercept it, a crucial financial vein of Russia's empire dies. The numbers of this pursuit are practically absurd. Picture a 23-year-old deteriorating vessel attempting to evade a cutting-edge Ferrari across the Atlantic. The Berthoff tears through 15-foot waves at 28 knots while the tanker lumbers pathetically at only 12. But here's what makes this a brilliant display of strategic pressure. The Berthoff doesn't merely observe, it comprehends. Its intelligence system, the ANSBS-75 air search radar, sweeps the horizon across 200 nautical miles, monitoring up to 200 targets at once. 25,000 foot overhead, a P-8 Poseidon serves as the aerial observer, releasing sonar that converts the ocean into a digital map. The Russians are in full panic mode. They've disabled their AIS transponder, attempting to disappear from public tracking. They believe the dense morning fog provides cover. Fatal error to the Berthoff's detection systems. Concealing yourself on open water is equivalent to hiding a roaring fire in a quiet library. Yet, you cannot simply capture a vessel this massive without ironclad legal justification. According to UN UNCLOS maritime law, the Americans must demonstrate this ship is stateless. As the Berthoff narrows the distance to 1,000 yards, the stress reaches critical levels. On the tanker's deck, crew members frantically splash paint across the hull, attempting to sketch a rough Russian flag, a frantic middle finger appeal for sovereign immunity. Moscow already threatens over long-range communications. Touch this vessel and you touch Russia. It's a political powder keg. If you occupied the commander's position on the Berthoff with ocean spray against the windows and legal complications mounting, would you dispatch the boarding team immediately and risk international crisis? Or would you wait for this phantom vessel to commit a decisive mistake? Stay attentive because the conclusion is a lesson in making the bear flinch first. Picture this. You're commanding the Bella 1 and you believe you've executed a brilliant maneuver. You reach the bridge controls, flip a switch and click. Your AIS transponder dies. On every public tracking platform from London to Singapore, your 318,000-ton steel monster simply disappears. To the Russian sailors aboard, they've transformed into phantoms. They genuinely believe that by shutting off their digital signal, they've outwitted the planet's most sophisticated maritime tracking network. It's like a toddler hiding their face and believing they're invisible. Unfortunately for Moscow, the US Navy doesn't require your cooperation to locate you. While the Russians celebrate in darkness, a network of SAR satellites peers straight through the storm clouds. This is synthetic aperture radar, technology that doesn't require daylight or transponder signals. It fires microwave pulses at the ocean surface, generating a high-resolution snapshot of the sea. While the Bella 1 attempts concealment in shadows, the Americans observe a 1,000 feet long metallic streak cutting through waves in real time. However, Simply spotting a ship isn't sufficient to freeze Putin's finances. To lawfully capture a vessel this size, you don't just need an image. You need an identity marker. This is where the pursuit becomes a masterclass in advanced surveillance. A P-8 Poseidon, the planet's most lethal tracking aircraft, roars across the tanker's flight path at reduced altitude. The crew isn't delivering a torpedo, they're planting a sonic monitoring system. They deploy a series of sonobuoys into the Bella 1's route. These are extremely sensitive underwater listening devices that float on the surface, suspending hydrophones hundreds of feet below. Every vessel possesses a distinct acoustic signature. The way those enormous propellers disturb the water, the particular vibration of a 23-year-old engine, it generates a mechanical pulse that's impossible to replicate. The instant the Bella 1 crosses that sonic monitoring system, its distinctive voice gets captured, digitized, and transmitted to an extensive AI database. Now, the US Navy doesn't just spot a ship. They possess the Bella 1's fingerprint. But how do you track a Phantom across an entire ocean without detection? The solution isn't pursuit. It's a digital surveillance web. The US Navy engages the SOSUS network, an extensive Cold War-era underwater listening system enhanced with modern AI. Merged with the P-8's sonic monitoring grid of sonobuoys, they establish a 500-mile acoustic detection barrier. Regardless of how much the Russians disable their radar or shelter in storms, the characteristic low-frequency sound of that 23-year-old propeller broadcasts into American detection systems. The US doesn't need proximity. They've converted the entire North Atlantic into a massive invisible listening device. They aren't pursuing the Bella 1. They're waiting for it to enter its own trap. These drones travel at under 10 knots, meaning they'd never win a speed contest. Instead, the US employs the AI intelligence from the P-8 to forecast the Bella 1's precise course 48 hours beforehand. They position the Remus 300 UV directly in the tanker's trajectory, thousands of miles from where the Ghost believes it's secure. It's a silent autonomous hunter positioned directly under the hull, monitoring every decision the Russian captain executes. While the bear in Moscow burns millions in fuel for a zigzagging getaway, the US simply waits and allows the ocean's natural flow to do the work. As the pursuit drives deeper into the harsh North Atlantic waters, the mood inside the Bella 1 transforms from triumph to absolute consuming paranoia. The Russian captain understands that despite disabling his AIS and hiding in fog, the American presence hasn't budged an inch. He's frantic. He begins pushing his 23-year-old engines to maximum capacity, forcing the 300,000-ton monster into a sequence of violent bone-rattling zigzags. It's like observing a skyscraper attempting to evade a bee swarm. This zigzag tactic comes straight from Soviet naval doctrine. By continuously altering course, the Russians hope to disrupt any intercept trajectory. But there's an enormous flaw with this reasoning: physics. Every time a vessel that size turns, it sheds momentum and consumes an ocean of fuel. The Bella 1 is fundamentally hemorrhaging cash just to remain stationary. Then Moscow chooses to intensify. From the gray fog, a Russian Project 20380 corvette, the Starogeshchi, materializes on the horizon. This is an advanced bodyguard armed with FK-2 radar and weaponry. Its objective: to function as a physical and electronic barrier for the tanker. Abruptly, the Berthoff's Combat Information Center explodes with alert signals. The Russian corvette triggers its powerful electronic warfare equipment, saturating the zone with high-intensity interference. On the American radar displays, the distinct metallic streak of the Bella 1 disintegrates into a chaotic jumble of static and phantom echoes. For a heart-stopping instant, the impossible occurs. The Americans lose tracking. In the midst of a transatlantic storm with 30-knot winds and house-sized waves, the Phantom ship has essentially vanished into an electronic void. The Russian crew likely celebrates, believing they finally blinded the Eagle. But this is where the US Navy demonstrates why they don't operate like everyone else. If you commanded the Berthoff and your main radar just went dark, would you panic and race blindly into the tempest? Or would you trust a system that's already 3 moves ahead? The Americans trust the system. While the Russian corvette busily screams electronic interference at the Berthoff, It completely overlooks the silent acoustic network the US established days earlier. Remember those autonomous Remus 300 UUV drones positioned beneath the waves? They don't employ radar. They utilize acoustic detection systems that are entirely resistant to radio frequency interference. The Berthoff's AI, a system with computing power equivalent to 10 NVIDIA RTX 4090s, absorbs the intermittent sonar signals from the drones and combines them with historical vessel movement patterns. It determines the Bello 1 isn't simply zigzagging, it's tracking the Gulf Stream edge to exploit the thermal layers to mask its engine sound. The AI doesn't just estimate where the tanker is, it computes exactly where it must be in 60 minutes. While the Russians burn millions in premium fuel to sustain their defensive screen, the US is simply noting the jamming. Tragically for the Kremlin, its advanced corvette now functions as a massive neon indicator for the US Navy. By jamming the Berthoff, the Russians have accidentally confirmed precisely where their valuable cargo hides. It's the ultimate geopolitical own goal. By day 6 conclusion, the Bello 1 is depleted. Its engines beg for relief, and its bodyguard has exposed the secret it was meant to safeguard. Moscow runs low on options, and the Americans prepare to use the Dark Fleet's own arrogance against them. Stay attentive because day 7 is when the Russians grab a pink bucket, and the world begins mocking. As the pursuit enters week 2, the situation on international waters transforms from a technical chase to a scene of absolute, frantic spectacle. Desperate for sovereign immunity, Russian sailors are observed dangling over the side, splashing white, blue, and red paint onto the corroded hull. It's a pitiful display. The lines are uneven and the colors run into the sea. High overhead, the P-8 Poseidon's camera, a system with space telescope zoom capability, is live broadcasting the entire artistic attempt in 4K. The US Navy isn't merely observing. They're constructing a digital proof archive demonstrating this sovereign Russian ship was just an anonymous ghost vessel 5 minutes prior. Then the Berthoff decides the courteous observation phase ends. The 4,500-ton cutter surges to 20 feet swells, reducing the gap from a mile to merely 500 feet. This is the critical zone. The radio crackles with a cold American directive. Vessel Bello 1, heave to and prepare for boarding. Moscow's escort corvette, the Starogashchi, loses composure. It swerves dangerously near the Berthoff's bow, executing a ramming tactic to compel the Americans to withdraw. It's a high-velocity game of chicken in a freezing storm. The Russian captain shouts over the radio about acts of war, while his vessel zigzags like a terrified animal. But the Americans don't flinch. While the Russian corvette burns fuel and nerves, the Berthoff employs AI-assisted thrusters to maintain its station with surgical precision. One vessel is a chaotic tangle of metal and pride. The other is a $700 million hunter that refuses to yield. The bear in Moscow roars for confrontation, but the eagle simply documents every blunder. As the new year nears, the Bello 1 isn't a vessel anymore. It's a trapped target. Stay with me because the final action isn't a warning shot. It's a legal knockout that leaves Putin's oil fleet paralyzed in its tracks. As the calendar moves into 2025's final days, the Atlantic Ocean becomes a freezing gray limbo. We're no longer in the warm Caribbean. We're entering the North Atlantic danger zone near Greenland and Iceland. Inside the Bello 1, now frantically being renamed the Marinara in the official Russian records, the atmosphere is one of absolute shivering fear. The Russian sailors are exhausted. They've been fleeing for 12 days continuously. Their engines scream, shaking so intensely that the hull rivets begin to leak. They peer through their frost-coated windows and see the USAGC Berthoff still present, sitting on their shoulder like an unavoidable terror. This is where the mental warfare becomes a physical brawl. Moscow, realizing their paint and prayer tactic failed, transmits a final desperate order to the escort corvette, the Starogashchi. End this immediately. The Russian corvette, an advanced warship, suddenly turns sharply, its hull moaning as it slices directly across the Berthoff's bow at 27 knots. This is ramming on the brink of suicide. If the ships crash in these 30-foot swells, they both sink within minutes. It's a game of chicken where the loser receives a watery tomb. On the Berthoff's bridge, The American commander stares at the Russian hull just 100 feet distant. You can hear the thunder of Russian engines over the screaming wind. The pressure is so intense you could slice it with a blade. The Russian captain hopes the Americans will flinch, that they'll abandon the chase to prevent catastrophe. But the berth-off isn't merely a ship. It's an extension of an AI-powered network. While the Russian captain manually guides his vessel with white knuckles and perspiration, the American cutter receives micro-adjustments from an autonomous flight control system. It's the maritime equivalent of a Tesla Plaid in insane mode. The berth-off glides through the swells, holding its position with precision that seems supernatural. Every time the Russian corvette attempts to push, the berth-off pivots, maintains station, and records the entire aggressive act in 4K for the UN to witness. Then arrives the checkmate action from the Kremlin. In a frantic midnight modification to the Russian Maritime Register, the ship receives official renaming to Marinera. They believe they've triumphed. They believe by assigning it an official Russian name and government registry, they've rendered it untouchable sovereign territory. Tragically for Putin, he just stepped directly into history's most expensive snare. By officially claiming the vessel, Russia has just confessed to the entire planet that they control the Dark Fleet. They've eliminated their own plausible deniability. The US Navy recognizes that boarding the ship now would trigger actual war, something Moscow is provoking them into. So, the Americans execute something even more crushing. They halt. The berth-off reduces power, allowing the Marinera to advance into the freezing North Atlantic fog. For an instant, the Russian crew celebrates. They believe they've escaped. They believe they've defeated the Americans. But the celebration ceases when a catastrophic roar reverberates from the ship's decks. That 23-year-old diesel engine, pushed to its absolute maximum for 14 days of violent high-speed zigzagging through freezing swells, has finally surrendered. The main crankshaft fractures with explosive force, and the engine room fills with dense black smoke. The Americans didn't need to deplete their fuel. They simply forced the bear to run until its own heart exploded from the pressure. The 300,000-ton monster is now a dead, shivering mass. The tanker sits thousands of miles from any friendly harbor, and because it's now officially a sanctioned Russian vessel, no commercial tugboat or port in Iceland or Greenland will approach it. On January 1st, 2026, as the planet celebrates the new year, the Marinera sits dead in the water amid a sub-zero storm. Its engines are silent, its heating is offline. The $100 million worth of oil in its hold is now a frozen, worthless mass. Russia didn't just lose the vessel, they lost dignity. They spent millions on an advanced escort. They revealed their secret fleet to the planet. And ultimately, they were left with a 300,000-ton steel iceberg that nobody will assist. This is the ultimate self-defeat. The US Navy didn't need to launch a single weapon to prevail. They used physics, AI, and the harsh reality of international law to transform Putin's Dark Fleet into a lonely, humiliated wreck. The bear didn't just flinch. It retreated into its cave, shivering and bankrupt. So here's the question for you. Was the $100 million wager worth the humiliation? Or did Russia just demonstrate that, in the contemporary world, high-tech intelligence will always triumph over low-tech muscle? Type brains or brawn in the comments below, and let's see who truly won this New Year's confrontation. See you in the next breakdown.